Hello, I'm Ron Sheldon. I'm the Technical Service Department Manager at Sound Off Signal. The following technical video is designed to give you programming and operational information. We hope you find this useful in the operation of our product. So let's get started. In front of me today are the nERGY 400 series sirens. We have three different basic versions of this siren. Our first one off to my left here is our console model with a rotary switch to change tones and to turn it on and off with. It has 8 push buttons, rotary broadcast, horn, and manual button down the bottom here. The next one is our console version of the siren, but it is a push button version with push buttons for the siren tones, and this faceplate looks exactly like our remote faceplate looks. And the last one is our base unit, which plugs our remote into it, or it can be used and plug our handheld siren interface into it also. So either one of these two can be plugged into this same base and operate. Now, one of the things with this series of sirens is that they can be either 100 watt or 200 watt. And if you get a 200 watt version, you're able to hook up 2 different speakers. And with those 2 speakers, you can have a tone come out of each speaker. So that's kind of another unique feature of these. The other thing to keep in mind is that with the handheld version, you're only going to get 6 auxiliary buttons, versus in any the other series and the remote, you will wind up getting 8 auxiliary buttons. It's just called space, not enough room for 8 buttons on the remote. This is the instruction sheet that you'll be receiving with your sirens. Any one of the 3 series of sirens, you'll receive an instruction sheet that looks kind of like this. The first part gives you some of the warnings, gives you some of the mechanical hookups or how to mount the siren. Over here gives you your specifications, and it goes down your current draw, the voltage range, the off current or quiescent current, and some of the other specifications for the sirens, and they're all the same. The next page gives you some of your hookups. In the siren here, we call this the amplifier plug or the amp plug, and it gives you some of the connections for that amp plug, like the rotary broadcast, the part kill, which we're referring to as the neutral safety switch right up here. It also has an auxiliary input that goes to ground to turn the siren on, and it has your power and ground, backlighting, and shows your speaker outputs over here. And as you can see, depending upon which siren you get, either 100 watt or 200 watt, you'll use either 1 speaker or 2 speakers. Next to it here is some explanations as to what some of these functions actually do. We have part kill, we have ignition input, over here we have auxiliary input, rotary broadcast, and then down here we go to horn ring and siren speaker out, and backlighting at the very bottom down here that is covered up a little bit. On the third page we get into the connections for our auxiliary output push buttons, and it explains here the push buttons that are available and what the wire color are to get a 12-volt signal out. We have 2 push buttons on each of these sirens, and it will be 7 and 8 on the 8-button versions, and then we also have it 5 and 6 on the handheld portion. And those 2 are set up where you can have a normally open or a normally closed relay. And also you can have internal or external power. I'll give you an example. If you've got a device that you're connecting to the siren that requires a 5-volt signal, you're able to utilize 7 or 8 relay outputs to control that, because you can go external and utilize the 5-volt signal that comes in with it. It also goes over the fusing over in this area here, and the fusing is underneath the snap top cover of the siren, and these are the 2 fuses right here in the tail end that go to 7 and 8 that you just move if you want external power or internal power. They have 2 different slots where you wind up putting them in. Each one of our outputs are 10 amp on the push buttons, and our slide switch outputs are 20 amps on each one of the slide switches, but the combination of all 3 outputs on the slide switch cannot exceed 50 amps. The next page actually shows you the remote, and I picked the remote instruction sheet, so you have actually a remote looking faceplate here, which is exactly like the push button version of the console. Now on this page here we start getting into the programming of different aspects of the siren. If you note here, it says, gray area. Anything that is shaded in gray on any of these functions is factory preset. The siren should come with those already programmed to those settings. And we had come up with the input settings where we deal with part kill, and then we go down and over here to horn ring, tone. These are all some of the input settings that we wind up changing in part kill. We refer to it either a positive input or a ground side input. Horn ring application, park latch, some of these other ones that are the input settings on this page. The next page goes over some of the slide switch settings and how we can set up our slide switch, whether we have a progressive setup, whether we have a individual setup, where they're all individual, slide 1, 2, and 3 act individually, or whether we wind up having it be 1 and 2 individual and then 3 with all 3 of them coming on. Below that is PA volume, backlight intensity, how we program those. Alternate modes start up here, and there we start dealing with some of the horn ring applications and some of the unique features that we can have the horn ring operate under according to this table. We go into gun lock security. Other modes is the very last one down here, and it carries over here to the other side. And other modes are things like auxiliary buttons. Do we want it to be enable only for horn ring in slide switch 3 only, or allow it to be operating anytime? We have a buzzer set up so that anytime you push a button, a buzzer sounds with the siren. Hands-free mode, power down mode, how we want to operate that. Horn ring standby, and some of our 8-second buzzer timer, which what that does is that allows, if you have an auxiliary button turned on, you have a slide switch turned on, you'll get a tone every 8 seconds out of the siren to let you know that that device is turned on, or you have something turned on the siren. So you're not driving down the road with your lights on and you're not even aware of it, like in the daytime. The next page is going to go over some of the programming of the buttons themselves, meaning, do I want button number 1 to be one button arrow? Do I want it to be a momentary? Do I want it to be just on and off? And here's where we wind up programming those. Down below that, it basically calls out the default settings of the auxiliary push buttons. At the top of the page here, we have a unique feature which is called mapping. We're able to map any one of our auxiliary buttons or our tone buttons, our siren tone buttons, to any one of the 3 slide switches. So if I turn on slide switch 2 and I have button 3 mapped to it, button 3 will turn on also. Or if I have a siren tone I want to come on in slide switch 2, I can program that in there also. Below is a troubleshooting fault diagnostic table. In case you have any type of difficulty or something's not working correctly, it'll give you an indication like a low voltage, speaker out, communication error, things like that, but it will tell you here as for what the failure is for the certain diagnostic indicators and the lights coming on or flashing. The last page that we get to here is some of our siren tones. And like I'd mentioned before, we can actually program speaker A and speaker B to whatever tone we may want that to be in a dual tone setup. And this is how we go about programming that. And we can go in here and just follow the programming table here, and we can set that up so that when we push wail button, for instance, we'll get a wail out of one speaker and a yelp out of the other. And this is the table that you'll use to follow for that particular one. And it goes over the wail button, the yelp button, tone button, horn, and manual buttons. So each button actually kind of operates independently a little bit there. And we also have a tone scroll. You can also have a siren tone that scrolls through different tones like wail 1, wail 2, yelp, and piercer and alert. We're going to be showing you how to set up and operate the 400 series siren utilizing the remote version right here. And on the remote version, what we're going to wind up doing, and on the back side here, first off, normally I've got a little small data cable plugged in here. There's a big long one that comes with the siren. I'm just using this for purposes of demonstration. Plugged in our 5-pin connector here for the slide switch. And these two guys right here, the heavy 10-gauge red wires, provide power to the slide switch and to the auxiliary push buttons on the siren. The top one here amp connector, which is a 14-pin connector, is the one from the relay. These are all the relay outputs that you'll be wiring into lights or devices that you want to turn on via the push buttons. The bottom connector here is where I get my power and ground, my ignition input wire, radio array broadcast, backlighting, part kill, horn ring. That's where these wires are located right here that you'd connect to those other devices to have the siren operate those also. But they're all on the back side here. And on the back side also, let me show you one other thing here, which is kind of between these two connectors. There's a little fuse. It'll be on the 100-watt series with one speaker, it's 10 amp, and on the 200-watt series, it is a 20 amp. That is the main power fuse. Okay, so I'm going to turn this guy back around here. We're going to power this up for you right here, real quick like. And as you notice, the standby button light has turned on. That means that we're all set and ready to go. And now we're going to start programming the auxiliary switches. I'm referring back to the instruction sheet again for the auxiliary switches. And right here is the explanation for how you program those switches. You'll push button 1 and 8. And when I say 1 and 8, they're auxiliary buttons. You'll push 1 and 8 until the LED number 1 of your slide switch flashes. Every time you push an auxiliary button, you will change the arrow display above it to light up one of these LEDs. Once you've set that button for where you want it to operate, whether it's the one button arrow, whether it's just on off, momentary, 8-second, then you will push the radio rebroadcast button and that will kick you out of the programming mode. So we'll demonstrate that for you right now. On the 400 series remote here, we're going to show you how to program the auxiliary buttons. Like I had said, we push button 1 and 8, hold them down until the number 1 LED lights on the slide switch and flashes. Now I'm in program mode and I can program each of these buttons. I'll push the second button here first to see where that's set up. Push it once, and as you notice, it is the second LED turned on in the arrow display up here, which represents just an on-off. Push it on, push it again, it goes off. If I push the button one more time, you'll see that another LED lights up here on the arrow. Right now, it's momentary. So if I were to go, say I want this button to be momentary, I'm all done programming. I push the radio rebroadcast button down here at the bottom, push that, flashes a couple of times right here on our LEDs, and now we're back to operation. And if I push this button, it's going to only be on when I push it and off when I let go. On when I push, off when that's momentary. We're going to go back into programming mode again. 1 and 8. LED number 1 flashes down here. Now we're going to go and I'm going to show you, normally this is a factory preset that button number 8 is gun lock, which is an 8-second timer. We'll verify that. Sure enough, we've got the center LED on and that represents the 8-second timer. Remember, every time I push this, I'm going to toggle through that entire list to determine how I want this particular button to operate. And I'm going to go back to gun lock. I'm going to kick myself out of programming mode by pushing the radio broadcast button. There we go. We're back to operation now. Now if I push this button, it'll remain on for 8 seconds and then turn off. There you go. And that's how we go about programming the auxiliary buttons right here. Now we're going to go program the slide switch and show you how the slide switch gets programmed. Going back to our instruction sheet as a reference here, we're going to program the slide switch like I had mentioned, and what we do is we push button number 1 and 4, that's auxiliary button number 1 and 4, until we get the LED number 2 in the slide switch flashing. And there are 3 separate ways of programming the slide switch, and only 3. The first one is a progressive where 1 is on and they go to 2, 1 and 2 will be on, and 3 will have all 3 on. The second is individual, and the third is 1 and 2 individual, and the last one with all 3 on. Now, how we program these, once we go into push button 1 and 4, and we get the number 2 LED on the slide switch to come on, all we do is push auxiliary button 1, 2, or 3. 1 is for this one, 2 is for that, and 3 is for that, and then we push rotary broadcast button to come out of programming mode. Now, we're going to push auxiliary buttons 1 and 4. And there we go. We get slide switch button number 2 flashing. Now, as you notice, we're in progressive. We're in the number 1 here. If I want them to operate individually, I'll push number 2. And now I push rotary broadcast, and we come out of that. Now, each time I push, 1's on, 2's on individual, and 3's individual. They'll follow the lights here. If it were progressive, 1 would stay on and 2 would stay on all the way to when I'm on 3. Okay? Real quick, I'm going to show you the last one. 2's flashing. We'll push number 3. Push rotary broadcast. We come back. 1 is on. 2's on individual. And 3, we have all 3 outputs turned on in the slide switch. So that's how you go about programming the slide switch. Now let's program the backlight intensity. I skipped over the PA volume settings, which is right here, which follow the same format as programming anything else. I don't have a speaker hooked up, so I'm not going to demonstrate that particular portion. We're going to go to backlight intensity, which is located right down here, and we're going to program the backlight intensity. A backlight intensity, or the backlight control here, is the gray wire from the bottom connector, the amp connector. You need to apply 12 volts to the gray wire to turn on the backlight. And it looks like that. As long as 12 volts is applied to the gray wire, you're going to get backlight intensity. Now, to adjust the backlight intensity, let's say you're the night shift guy and you want it dimmed down a little bit. All you need to do is push and hold the rotary broadcast button and push one of these numbers on the auxiliary, 1 through 8. 8 being the brightest, 1 being the dimmest. I push number 2, I let go of it, and we dim down. I push and hold it, I'll go to 7, gets pretty bright, 8 all the way, 4. So wherever you want it, you just hold the rotary broadcast button down and push one of your auxiliary buttons until you get the intensity of the backlight that you want. Now I'm going to show you how to program the gun lock security feature. In the alternative modes here, we wind up pushing the button number 2 and 6 in order to get 1 and 2 on the slide switch to flash. I'm bypassing these alternative horn ring modes here, which go with this table. I don't have a speaker hooked up, so I can't demonstrate those at this moment in time, but they follow the same thing. I'm going to jump down here to a unique feature, which is the gun lock security. It comes factory preset, button number 8 with an 8-second timer. But I could set that up so that you have to push another button plus button number 8 in order for the gun lock to open up. And you'd have to push that button, which is number 1, within 1 second after you push button number 8. And I'll demonstrate that for you right now. Like I said before, we're going to push button 2 and 6 and hold them until 1 and 2 on the slide switch flash. Now, I had mentioned these first 2 buttons are your alternative modes for your horn ring. Because we don't have a speaker hooked up, we're not going to demonstrate those today. But you can just follow along with those tables there, and you'll be able to program those horn ring functions. The third button over here is for the gun lock security. Now I'm going to push this, turns the LED on the top. Now to get out of program mode, I push rotary broadcast button, and we kick out. Now, if I want to get my gun or release my gun, I push button 8, but nothing happens. I can push it all day long, nothing will happen. This is a 2-button security feature where if I push button 8 and then the standby, now it lights up and it will go through my 8-second timer. It's just an added security feature for the gun lock, and now it just shut off, the 8 seconds elapsed. Now we'll show you how to program some of the other mode functions. Some of the other mode functions that we find are located here on this page underneath this heading here. We wind up pushing the button number 1 and 5 on the auxiliary to get 1 and 3 on the slide switch LEDs flashing to get into this mode. This mode actually has a lot of unique features. Hands-free, it has a buzzer for whenever you push the buttons that make a buzzer, some of the horn ring functions, and also some of the tone button and horn button functions. We're going to go all the way down here to the number 7, a nice little feature to have and to set up on your siren, which is the 8-second buzzer. It tells you if you have something turned on the siren. Now to get into the other modes programming on the siren, we push the 1 and 5 auxiliary buttons until we get 1 and 3 LEDs flashing on our slide switch, just like that. Now, we're going to go all the way down here to number 7. And what's not turned on right now, we actually do have the buzzer turned on so that when we push every button, it makes a buzzer sound to know that you are actually turning it on. I'm going to push number 7 and turn that on, and push rotary broadcast to get out of programming mode. Now what this function is going to do is every time I have something turned on, and I'll turn on my slide switch, within 8 seconds, you'll hear a tone. Just like that. Every 8 seconds, we'll hear a beep. There it goes again. So that this lets you know, during the daytime, sometimes you may not know you've got your takedowns turned on, or that you've got another function, your arrow turned on, something like that. You may not be aware of it, but you're going to hear a constant beep like that every 8 seconds, that you have something turned on. Also, while we're right here and I push the arrow button, as you can see, the display up on top represents what your light bar should be doing for your arrow functions externally. From right, left, to center out, to off. Now let's demonstrate some of the other mode functions and the programming of those. The input mode programming functions start right here. We wind up pushing 1 and 3 until the 3rd LED is flashing on the slide switch. The first one basically goes over your part kill, and it's the polarity in which the part kill operates, whether we have a 12-volt signal or a ground signal to activate part kill, which will kill the siren tone and stop it from operating. As we keep moving along, we wind up with horn ring polarity. Over here, we go to tone push button. All the way up here is level 3 activation, and level 3 activation is where and how are we going to have our siren tone operate. Do we have it operate only in slide switch 3, or do we have the siren tones operate anytime? Then we move down to horn ring timeout, part kill latch, and basically part kill latch is if you want the siren to resume once part kill signal is removed. Give you an example, you put it in park, the siren shuts down. You pull your ignition, your shifter out of park, and the siren will come back on if you have it programmed that way, or it won't come on at all until you have to push a button on the siren for one of the siren tones. So that's what we do there with part kill latch. Horn ring scroll, and then auxiliary input. Now auxiliary input's kind of interesting. It utilizes the purple wire that comes out of the bottom connector, which is the amplifier connector. And if you ground that wire, put it to ground, typically in the way in which it comes to you, the siren tone that is programmed in the whale position will come out the speakers. So you'll get a siren tone from grounding that wire. But you can also have that programmed to a horn sound. And we've got several horn tones in the programming of this siren. So you can have either or, and that's programmed right there. Now I'm going to show you how we program the input settings for the siren. One of the things here is, the very first one on the input settings is your part kill. And we have a yellow wire that comes out of the amp connector, which is the bottom one on the back side here, and this yellow wire is for part kill. Right now it's factory preset, so it will be a 12 volt signal. If I have the siren turned on and I touch the part kill wire to 12 volts, it shuts off as long as I have 12 volts maintained. When I remove it, it comes right back on. And this is a positive switched here. Now we're going to change that to ground switched. We pushed 1 and 3 until the slide switch LED number 3 flashes. Now we're in program mode. Number 1 is for our polarity of part kill. I push that, push radio broadcast. Now I turn a siren tone on, and I use my part kill wire, and I go to 12 volts, nothing happens. I will need to go to my ground, and it shuts down. But it resumes as soon as I remove ground. If I don't want it to resume once I come out of park, this is what I'll need to do. We'll go back into the input settings again, 1 and 3, until this flashes. Button number 6 down here is for part kill latch. Now, what this does is either you can have the siren resume when part kill signal is removed, or you can have it so that once you remove that signal from part kill, it does not resume until you push a button. So we're going to push that one right there, get out of radio broadcast button. We push that, we're out of programming. Now I turn a siren tone on. I take my yellow part kill wire and my ground, and I touch it. It shut off. I remove my part kill wire from it. The siren does not come back on. It will not come back on until I push a siren tone button. I have to do something at this point. I go to ground. It shuts off. Remove it. I have to push something to get it going again. Okay, now we're going to take a look at the slide switch control. Right now, my siren tone will work anytime, no matter where my slide switch is. If I don't want my siren to come on unless I'm in code 3 or slide switch number 3, we'll program it like this. Go back to the input settings, 1 and 3. That's flashing. While I'm here, I'm going to remove my latch from my part. And I'm going to change this back to positive for my part kill signal. But over here, number 4 on this setting is for my slide switch siren control. And if I turn this off, my siren will only work in slide switch number 3. Now I'm out of program mode. I push a siren tone, nothing happens. Nothing's happening. If I go all the way to slide switch 3, now I push a siren tone, now it will operate. I come off 3, it's going to shut down. I go back to 3, because I already have that pushed, it will come right back on. Siren off, does not work. That is how you change some of the input settings of the 400 series siren and get them to operate exactly how you want for your setup. Another unique feature the 400 series siren has is the mapping function. Mapping function allows you to program any one of the siren tone buttons or the auxiliary buttons here to the slide switch, so that when I would go to slide switch 1 or 2, either a siren tone could come on or one of these auxiliary buttons would be turned on. So let's take a look at the instruction sheet so we can kind of walk through this. This is where the programming is located on the instruction sheet for the mapping function. Basically what we wind up doing here is pushing auxiliary buttons number 4 and 5 until the radio rebroadcast button flashes. The LED above that button flashes. and then we're in program mode and we're able to program any one of those auxiliary buttons to the slide switch. Now let's show you how to program the mapping function, mapping features of the 400 series Siren. Referring to the instruction sheet like we did just a minute ago, we wind up pushing button number 4 and 5 until your radio rebroadcast LED flashes, just like that right there. Now I'm in program mode. Now, I'm going to program siren tones and auxiliary buttons to the slide switch. So I'm going to turn the slide switch on first, and number 1. Number 1, I want the yelp tone and button number 4, auxiliary, to come on. Now I'm also going to program slide switch number 2. I can do that at the same time. I don't have to go back out and come back in. Go to slide switch number 2, and there I want this siren tone to come on, the wail, and button number 5 to come on. So now I can just bring that back to normal, push radio rebroadcast, and now we've programmed those settings. Now if I bring the slide switch to number 1, I get that siren tone and that light came on. That number 4 auxiliary output is turned on. I go to 2, it changed to my wail tone, turned this one off, and turned on number 5. So that's how we can actually utilize the slide switch to independently turn on a siren tone over here or any one of these auxiliary button outputs just by mapping these buttons to my slide switch. I go to 3 and I programmed nothing to 3, so everything shuts off. But as I go back, they will change. And I can also, while I'm right here, if you noticed, I want to show you that, I can override the mapping. I can physically shut this guy off if I want to. Same way with that. But once it's mapped, I go back in, it's going to come back on. But I can physically override those if need be. That is how we do the mapping. That's how we program mapping the auxiliary and siren buttons to the slide switch. This completes the programming and operation of the 400 series Siren. There are many more programming and options available that you will find in your instruction sheet. Thank you for watching this technical video. Should you have any questions regarding any of our products, please contact our technical service department at 1-800-338-7337, and you push the number 4 for the technical service department, and one of the technicians there will be more than happy to answer any of your questions and help you with the operation or setup of our products. Thank you very much.